Another homeless encampment sweep is scheduled in Denver. Does it fit the policy, or is it to pretty up the space in front of the governor's mansion?
It just really annoys me. Like, it gave us all false hope.
What's the point of a left turn stoplight that never turns green?
We are getting to the place where it does feel overwhelming.
Plants meant to help burn scars recover are slow to grow, and that means they're not helping prevent what they were planted to do. And an ode to fall that has nothing to do with pumpkin spice. Down come the tents and up go the fences. On Tuesday, the city of Denver will clear yet another homeless encampment. This one is notable for its size and location. It's at 8th and Logan. The city insists the sweep has nothing to do with the location being right across the street from the governor's mansion. Our Steve Steger asked if the city's just trying to clean up Denver's image.
The signs are familiar. The people here have to move along. But next week's sweep of the camp at 8th and Logan will be different, says the mayor's office.
This is the first major initiative under the House 1,000 campaign that we launched on the first day of Mayor Johnston's time in office. This is something that we are really excited about.
Cole Chandler leads Denver Mayor Mike Johnston's lofty goal to end homelessness in the city. He says Tuesday's sweep of an encampment of 70 people will be the first time the city doesn't just move people on the street to another corner.
So this has never been done before in the city. We have never been able to close a camp, but actually tell people you have a place to go.
Chandler says it's possible because for the 70 people living here, the city has 70 units of housing available.
So we were able to go to people and say, hey, we've got a hotel room option for you. We've got a micro community option for you. What do you think best meets your needs? And then with those capacities and resources, we've been able to place people into those locations.
It's hard not to question the location of this first of its kind effort, especially when other encampments, like this one at 18th and Grant, are in front of businesses and people's homes. The encampment at 8th and Logan doesn't impede much. It's on an empty parking lot. An empty parking lot in a very visible spot right across the street from the governor's mansion.
There are people camped all over the city, and it's a really hard challenge. We know that. We know that neighborhoods are struggling. We know that businesses are struggling.
Chandler says location had nothing to do with it. This was about relationships city service providers have built with the people here for months.
So over the last 2 months, we've been building relationships with the people that are there. We've been getting to know them. We recognize that the people there want the housing that we're bringing online.
Same old sign, different day. The first test of Denver's resolve to solve its largest crisis. For Next, I'm Steve Steger.
Chandler says he does not have a number yet of how many of the folks at 8th and Logan have chosen a housing option. The city should have better data on that next week. And he says once more housing units open up, they'll try to do the same at other encampments around the city. All county clerks and election judges will have to follow new rules for the November election. And looking at some of these rules, they appear to be because of mistrust in a couple of former county clerks. One of the rules requires the clerk to submit a plan to the Secretary of State's office if there is to be maintenance on the surveillance system. Another rule requires state-mandated signature verification training for election judges. This is video of Denver County providing signature verification training. Now election judges must take the state training. And background checks will be required of all election judges, not just those who have access to sensitive voter data like all the different signatures I've ever done. The budget for next year is currently being debated by Denver City Council, including a $23 million increase request for DPD. Only a third of that, though, is for hiring new officers. $8 million would be for 3 recruiting classes. Chief Ron Thomas has set a goal for 167 new recruits, expecting 140, or 84% of them, to graduate and become officers. Except in the last 3 years, the graduating class has never seen more than 60% graduate.
Frankly, I think you and our budget office, Stephanie, I think are being wildly optimistic about reaching authorized strength.
By the numbers, DPD has been losing officers faster than they've been graduating recruits. In 2021, they lost 145 and gained 57. In 2022, they lost 132 and gained 102. This year, the projection is in the reverse direction, a loss of 81 and actually a gain of 110. Reproductive rights activists are celebrating the indecision of Colorado's medical, nursing, and pharmacy boards today. Those boards could not reach an agreement about the use of the controversial abortion reversal pill. Is it an accepted practice, or does providing it qualify unprofessional conduct? If all three boards agreed that abortion reversal was a valid medical practice, the law would not go into effect. The law passed by Democratic lawmakers classified abortion reversal treatment as unprofessional conduct. It's when a high dose of hormones is taken to reverse a medicated abortion. The law meant medical workers who provide it could be disciplined, and it would be a first of its kind in the country, setting a precedent for future legislation.
I hope what everyone knows is that I believe that all of us fundamentally believe that we deserve access to truth in advertising, that we shouldn't be deceived or manipulated when it comes to such an important decision like our lives or our pregnancy. And this bill is just one way to protect that bodily autonomy as well as that autonomy in decision making that every Coloradan deserves.
Last month, the state medical board explicitly called the treatment unprofessional conduct. The other two boards did not classify the treatment as accepted or unprofessional. Since the boards could not agree, the law is inching its way to remaining intact by the October 1st deadline, unless the boards change their minds. If I were ever a lawmaker, one of my first bills would be to require driver's license tests more often than when you turn the age of 16. Crossing light rail tracks did not exist when I took my driver's test, neither did roundabouts, and certainly not the type of stoplight that caused enough angst for one viewer to let us know about it, meaning there are several more of you who will be nodding your head in agreement. Watch this stoplight closely, because when it's done being red, the light does not turn green.
I got really excited and saw they were putting in a left turn lane arrow, and only to discover it's not a left turn arrow.
Who among us has never complained about a stoplight?
It's not so much a concern as an annoyance.
Here is what has Bree Lissick a little red. A left turn arrow that never turns green.
Considering the high pedestrian and bicycle traffic, the schools that are in close proximity, you would think they would put a green arrow there.
At Downing in Virginia, on the edge of Wash Park, is one of the city's updated stoplights. Instead of one light in the center of the intersection, the city is putting a stoplight over every lane of traffic. And at this location and several others, the city added a turn arrow. A turn arrow that does not really change how turning has always worked at the intersection.
It just seems that you wasted people's money putting in that arrow for basic knowledge of how to make a left-hand turn when there's no arrow.
A city spokeswoman said the amount of traffic here does not warrant a green turn arrow, and because adding a green arrow takes time away from the other cycles of the light. However, if it gets to the point where there are no gaps in the traffic for anyone to turn, a green arrow is possible.
Most mornings I have to wait till the light's turning red to turn because that's the only time there's a gap.
Clearly, that is not the case at 1 in the afternoon when I shot this footage. But in the morning and evening rush, it is easy to imagine.
Some mornings there's, a few cars in front of you, which means you're going to sit through the light, however many cycles of like one per car.
I don't know if we're going to get more feedback about the story or my idea that we should take more driver's tests. The city of Denver has 1,400 traffic signals. About 100 of them have flashing yellow arrows. Our next question comes from Bill, who wanted to know if Coloradans should be concerned that they could be indicted on the same charges as Hunter Biden for submitting a false statement while purchasing a gun. In Colorado, that could be as simple as not checking the box that you use or possess marijuana. Bill asked, can the names of people who buy marijuana be matched up with firearm purchases? First, a little background here. When you buy a gun, you got to fill out Form 4473, a federal ATF form. Even if someone uses or possesses pot legally in Colorado but does not disclose that on the form, they could be guilty of lying on the form, which is what Hunter Biden has been indicted for, accused of lying on a firearms form about previous drug use. But if a person answers yes to question 21G on that form regarding marijuana and other drugs, they would not be allowed to buy the gun in the first place. The ATF form clearly warns that the use or possession of marijuana is against federal law, even if it is legal in the state. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation told us it has no way to cross-reference pot purchases and firearms purchases. The state's Marijuana Enforcement Division also said it does not keep a record of IDs of people who buy weed. Checking ID is just to make sure that the buyer is older than 21. A bill in the state legislature died in 2019 that would have made it so anyone convicted of pot possession or use could still buy a gun in Colorado. Like little kids, museums across the world have picked things up, brought brought them home for show and tell. Now, the Denver Art Museum is putting things back where they found them, especially when the art came to them illegally. Last week, the museum announced it was working with the U.S. to give 5 sculptures back to the nations of origin. Back in January, the Denver Art Museum reached out to the feds about pieces of its collection connected to the gallerists Doris and Nancy Weiner in 2021, probably Weiner actually. In 2021, New York's district attorney convicted Nancy with trafficking illicitly acquired art from India and Asia and falsifying documents that said where the works were from. It's part of the Denver Art Museum's Providence research, the study of where art pieces came from and how they got to where they are now. The museum says it's an ongoing process, and they're working on repatriation, which is returning illicitly taken art and taking it back to its original home. Here's Kyle now with a message on this week's Word of Thanks.
There's a safe house in northern Colorado that serves survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking. And last year, that safe house was 100% occupied all year long. That's why this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign is supporting the nonprofit Alternatives to Violence. Since Wednesday, you've raised more than $10,000 to support their work. They assist survivors of violence in the community with things like emergency planning and short and long-term places to stay. They also help them with transportation if they had to leave their vehicle behind with an abuser. And when they're ready to go back out on their own, folks are able to shop at Alternatives to Violence Boutique for free to get the clothes and the furnishings, things like that they need to start their life over again. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 to join me and a bunch of other Coloradans in supporting Alternatives to Violence as they do crucial work in Loveland, Larimer County, and northern Colorado in protecting our neighbors.
We see a lot of flooding, again, erosion, these big landslide events because there isn't vegetation kind of holding the hillside in place.
Well, that's a problem. We could see more blocked off roads in the future if plants keep growing in the burn scars the way they are. That's the issue. They're not growing. Some thoughts on the joy of fall, which is coming, even if it's not quite fall weather yet. And this week, you came to us with your good news. So let's keep up our favorite Friday tradition next. Wash, rinse, plant. Colorado is used to this process. A wildfire wipes out a hillside, causing the potential for flooding and mudslides, and then we plant in the area to prevent that from happening. That's the issue in the Cameron Peak and East Troublesome burn scars. Plants are not growing back at the rate researchers expected. The vegetation in those areas help prevent loose ground from turning into landslides, debris flows, and other mass erosion events. Without them, that risk lasts even longer after the initial fire. Now, there are temporary band-aids for the situation, like aerial mulching. That's expensive. The U.S. Forest Service got around $22 million for mulching in the Poudre and Big Thompson. The money does not go as far as you might think, though. It costs between $2,500 and $3,000 an acre. You could also plant trees, but those take years to grow and are not cheap either. A fire ecologist from CSU says with future fires, it could take even longer to regenerate forests.
2020 was a pretty crazy year for us, but it's not expected to be that crazy in terms of the conditions that it created when those fires happened in the future. And so we need to figure out how we're going to manage these landscapes so that those next large fires don't happen.
She says part of that future is learning how to live more effectively with fire and having those conversations around mitigation and recovery. In the short term, mulching and reseeding native plants is one way to nudge Mother Nature along. Last day of summer, Lauren, we're not talking about the concern of fire, although I think today was a red flag day. Was that right?
Yeah, to the south, not in Denver, but yeah, to the south, we did have some areas in Colorado that do have red flag warnings out there right now until about 45 minutes from now or so. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, let's go ahead and take a beautiful look over Denver here. Sunny skies today, 76 right now at DIA. We were in the lower 80s. I think we made it all the way to like 83 degrees this afternoon. It's been breezy breezy out there as well, though. Winds right now coming in from the east-northeast at around 22 miles per hour. Those are sustained winds. As we take a look here at our wind gusts all across the Front Range, we've been seeing gusty winds right now, gusting up to 30 miles per hour at DIA. Then as you make your way to the west, in the foothills and high country, 39-mile-per-hour wind gusts in Red Cliff Pass, and Kenosha Pass seeing 31-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So we have seen those stronger winds further south, also paired with very dry air. So yes, this is where we've had the red flag warnings, where we want to watch for that increased fire weather danger to the southern portions of the I-25 corridor. And this is also into the wet and Sangre de Cristo Mountains, where we're going to continue to watch for that increased fire weather danger until 7 o'clock. As we monitor our HD Doppler radar, though, we're nice and clear and sunny over most of Colorado. We're going to be pretty clear tonight. Overnight lows pretty mild in the middle to upper 40s. And then to the northwest, we do have our first freeze warnings of the season. This is going to be central and upper Yampa River Basin areas, where we're going to watch for that freeze between 3 to 9 a.m. tomorrow, where those lows could drop as low as around 28 degrees. Now, moving into the first day of fall and the following day, we're going to actually see seasonal temperatures for this time of year, but then we're very warm as we go into next week.
Tomorrow is the first day of fall. So I want to know, when you see a 7-day forecast with sunny skies and highs in the 70s and 80s, what's the first word that comes to mind? Nice? Pleasant. How about, nice and pleasant are how I might describe 50 degrees and overcast. Sitting outside with a hot vanilla latte while wearing my Colorado tuxedo, a hoodie and shorts. Me and my sister are big fans of the Burr months. You know, the ones that end in B-E-R. Don't get me wrong here, I'm not anti-sun, although maybe this five-head is. After the heat and humidity of July and August, I'm ready for the months of crockpots, puffy coats, and seeing my breath in the morning. I mean, there's got to be a reason the last 4 months of the year end in B-E-R. We are racing towards your good news. I'm going to drag this out just to see if they get to the finish next. We make it our job to bring you good news every Friday, especially when I'm looking at the right spot. Well, it's our job, but you know what I mean. This week, instead of going to you, you came to us, and you've got some pretty great news. We'll start off strong with a viewer whose name is, I hope I pronounced this correctly, Kyle Clark. His good news is that this week he and his daughters picked the apples from their backyard tree and made their first apple pie together. Kyle says, I hope they remember stuff like this. You know they...
Almost there!
Some good news out of Greeley. Coming into screen is Romina, a 7th grader. She's been blind since birth and runs cross-country with a 5th grade teacher as her guide. Kyla and Romina go to all the meets together, where Kyla guides her over the terrain, around obstacles, and across that finish line. That was at a meet from yesterday. Lynn's good news is her mom's retirement. She says her mom is a one-way flight from Boston to Colorado right now to move closer to Lynn and the grandkids. Lynn says her mom's been a nurse her whole career, and now she's ready to pick her up at DIA to start her next chapter, probably watching the grandkids from time to time. And some good news from Jackie, who says her father, who had a massive stroke about 2 years ago that should have killed him, walked into her home and hugged her daughter on her first birthday last week. That's amazing good news. Mine is that it's Friday, with your feedback next. We're coming in hot and harsh on the yellow flashing arrow. Scott says instead of mandating additional driver's tests for people who are smart enough to figure out how to navigate our existing roads, maybe instead we should deny a license to incompetent people. I have to change my password like every 90 days. I'm just asking for driver's tests, every few decades maybe. I don't know. We'll see you next time.